I started out by messing it up, so. Well, good morning. It's a delight to be here. Last week, as we had Mother's Day, we talked about just honoring women in general. And today, as we begin, I'm actually beginning a family series. Now, some of you may be sitting here going, well, maybe you're a widow or a widower, or you don't have kids, or whatever. We are all a part of the family, and we can all be encouraging one another. Widows, older women also are supposed to be teaching the younger women how to love their husbands. The only time that the word love is used in conjunction with a wife loving a husband. She's not commanded to do that. But the older women are supposed to be doing that for the younger women. And for us men, that if you're an empty nester or a widower or whatever, we can still be encouraging younger men as to how to love their wives. So we're going to be talking about the forgotten relationship today, and I'll be doing a series on family. And although we'll be looking at kids and a variety of things, for all of us, it is still applicable. Because even as a grandfather, I work with my grandkids, terrorizing them usually, and but it's a part of me passing on to the next generation as I can, and so all of this will be fitting for all of us. I just want to put that up front. We lived in California for 10 years until last July when we moved to Salem and retired from full-time ministry. And we did a lot of traveling and exploring of California because I knew I would probably not live there again and probably would not have a reason to go to California again. And one of our favorite places was Bodie, California. Now, I don't know if you know about Bodie, but Bodie is a ghost town. It's at about 8,500 feet elevation. It's a very dry place, a hot place. It's on the backside of Yosemite, so it's on the eastern side of the Sierras. And we enjoyed our time up there and just look forward to going back. That's probably the only reason why we'll go back to California at some point in time. But we'd like to take our kids there at some point. But I'm told, it was a mining town. They had their own stamp mill and all that. I'm told that there was back in the day, there was an old miner coming into town leading his donkey with the work of his diggings. And as he was coming in, there was a younger man that had a wife, and he was just kind of standing there watching this old man come in and thinking, wow, he must be kind of lonely and stuff, being out there by himself. And as he was coming into town, all of a sudden the donkey stopped. And he tugged the rope. The donkey sat down on its haunches. The old miner came around and got really close to the face of the donkey, and the young man didn't hear what he said, but he got up, the donkey followed him away. And the young man was kind of mesmerized. How did he get that donkey to do that? So he stopped him and he said, tell me, what did you say to the donkey that when he was on his haunches, and you said something to him, he just automatically got up and followed you? The old miner said, well, when I got that donkey a few years back, I told it that I would not put up with any falderah. And that if he acted up, I'd give him 3 chances. And after those 3 chances, I'd make buzzard bait out of him. And that was number 1. I told him, remember what I said, that's 1. And the donkey followed him. Well, a young man, being a young man, pondered that, and how could he use that in his own life? Well, Michelle and I over the years have always tried to play a game of talking about how we love each other. We try not to use the word love too much because in the English language, love is it's not specific. So we try to talk about what we appreciate about each other. And we appreciate usually character issues or or growth, spiritual growth, or whatever, just the servanthood back and forth. And when we first had kids, that was 48 years ago, next week. And, no, today. Oh, my word. When we first had kids, I saw my wife, and she's trying to take care of the kids. And on Sunday mornings, I said, let me just do breakfast. And so for 48 years, I have done breakfast on Sunday morning. Kids are no longer home, but I still do that. You can give me a oh or kind of a, oh, that's okay. Yeah. I'm setting a bad example for some of you. So anyway, this morning I got up and made breakfast while she was getting ready, and I said, okay, it's time for breakfast. She came out, and she sat down, and we prayed, and then she looked at her plate. She said, did you burn the toast? I said, yeah, but I scraped yours, and I didn't scrape mine. She looked very close into my eyes, and she said, that's two. The forgotten relationship. It's easy for us to get pressed by all the activities of life and work and everything else. And this world tries to conform us to its values. And the word conform means to be pressed into its mold. Values which often seem right, perhaps, but too often they distract us from the true values of what God has for us. Could be life and death issues, could be personal wealth, could be society and equity, a host of other issues they're trying to force us into. We bring children into this world, and now once we have children, we're pressed even more. Just for kicks, let me just, on your paper there, I have 8 numbers. Let me just give you the 8 things that develop the morals in students. This was a study done a while back, so probably a couple of them have changed, and I'll make reference to that. The first thing that affects the morals of our kids is usually a personal hero. Could be someone in the family, extended family, could be someone else that is just a dear friend. In our family, we had a couple of dear friends that we were very happy to let them be great influences on our kids. Number 2 is parents or family, the greatest influence. Now, sometimes as parents, we don't feel like we are, but we can be and are often. The third one is either a boyfriend or a girlfriend. The fourth one is friends. The fifth one would be extended family. The sixth one, which has probably moved up in recent days, is media. Because every kid, it seems like, has media in the palm of their hand. The seventh one is a youth pastor or a youth worker. And the 8th one is a teacher. I've spent 30 years plus working with youth. Over the years, I've had many parents bring their kids to me and say, fix them. Wait a minute. You have a closer relationship than I do. Look at that list and make a couple of observations. You're smart people. Just make a couple of observations from that list. Anything stand out to you? That pause that I'm giving is I'm waiting for the answer. So what do you notice about those relationships as to how they impact a student? Pardon? Friends? And actually the closer the relationship, the greater the influence, right? Especially boyfriend, girlfriend, friends, all that. But also parents are up there in number 1 or number 2. And so the closer the relationship, the greater the influence. So we're going to be talking about some of that in the days to come. And I think you'll probably enjoy that. And again, a youth pastor or a youth worker, very powerful in one's life, but often they're down at the bottom of the list. So a healthy family is key. In Colossians, it talks about having a harmonious family, which I'm sure describes our families over the years, right? Maybe yes, maybe no at times, right? But it brings up a critical, forgotten relationship. If I were to ask you, and you don't have to answer this one, this is a rhetorical question, but you have to answer it in your mind. If I were to ask you, is or was your family child-centric, focused on their needs, or marriage-centric, focused on husband and wife? What would you answer? Again, don't answer out loud, just... And quite often, especially today, and for the last probably 20, 30 years, a lot of families have been child-centric. And that is not healthy for the child. Well, we want to take care of their needs. We want to keep them involved. We want to care for them in all these various ways. They need to see a healthy husband and wife, mother and father. Someone once told me that the best way that you can teach your sons and daughters how to love their spouse is to let them see you loving your spouse. So parents need to ask themselves, is our family child-centric or marriage-centric? I know it's busy. I know that there's a lot of things out there for kids to do. I know there's been a lot of things out there for years. It used to be, when I was a kid, there were no sports on Wednesday night because a lot of kids went to youth group. Now there's sports not only on Wednesday night, but on Sundays to drag families into various other places rather than church. Our conception of providing activities and stuff for our children may need to be questioned. And perhaps we maybe even deal with our guilt about how much time we do have by giving them more stuff and more activities. And that needs to be questioned. We need to ask, how much is too much? And what am I really teaching as values to my children with what I provide and a variety of other things? In Genesis chapter 2, which was read this morning, if you got your Bibles, flip over to that. I know it's a familiar passage, but I think it's an important one because there's a couple words that we need to hearken to out of these two verses. It says, and the Lord God fashioned into woman the rib which he had taken from man and brought her to the man. And the man said, this is now bone of my bones and flesh of my flesh. She shall be called woman because she was taken out of man. For this cause a man shall leave his father and mother and shall cleave to his wife, and they shall become one flesh. And the man and the woman were both naked and were ashamed. Several words we need to pull out of that. Number one, they're supposed to leave. Our kids are supposed to leave. Not this week, but in a few weeks we'll be talking about how do I deparent my kids. Get out of here. It's time for Mom and I. We'll talk about that. They're supposed to leave, and Mom and Dad are supposed to cleave. And the word cleave is an interesting word. If I took two words and had them really planed well to where they fit really tight together, and I glued them and clamped them, and that would be the idea of cleaving. And the idea is such that if I were to try to divide them again, it would cause damage to both boards. That's the idea of cleaving. Is that the husband and the wife are one, and to separate them would cause much damage. Now, I'm not going to get off on talking about marriage, divorce, and remarriage. That's a whole other issue, and that's Paul talks about that. Maybe someday I'll have the chance to talk about that. I don't know. But the issue right now is that leave and cleave. Becoming one. And that's the main focus of what every marriage should be. About a year before I left the last church, retired, I had a gentleman come to me and say, I just want you to know that I'm divorcing my wife, and gives me all these reasons why he's doing it, and just kind of talked. When he was done, I said, so I'm assuming that you want to know my opinion on this? He said, yeah. And I told him why he was wrong. Leave and cleave. I told him a whole bunch of other things I won't go into here. But he was unwilling to do anything, and had demonstrated that over about the previous 3 or 4 years that I had known him, and that we had known him, and that we had them both in counseling together for marriage issues. And he had demonstrated that he was not interested in working things out. The word says leave and cleave, to become one. Just a couple of thoughts about that. One of the problems that is probably the most prevalent in most marriages today is termed, or can be described in one term, mother-in-law. And so often it's talked about how the mother-in-law is a pain. And usually it's referred to of the wife's mother. The problem is it's usually not the wife's mother that's the problem. It's usually the husband's mother. But you can't talk about that one. And whether it's one or the other or both, leaving means leave your mama. And guys especially, leave your mama. Your wife is the one you're supposed to cleave to. My mom never came over after I was married and did my laundry. She never came over and cooked breakfast for me. She never called and said, how can I help you today? Because I left. And she understood that. And ladies, as moms, I encourage you to do that. But children usually come into the family. And just a quick sidestep here, because I want to talk about the benefit of marriage for just a few minutes. Psalm 127 verses 3 through 5 says, behold, children are a gift of the Lord. The fruit of the womb is a reward. Like arrows in the hand of a warrior, so are the children of one's youth. What are you supposed to do? What does the archer do with his arrows? Keeps them in his quiver, right? No, he lets them go. What's the purpose of marriage? Well, just to kind of give a brief summary, first of all, in Genesis it says God said it wasn't good for man to be alone. For a variety of reasons. 2 are better than 1. A helpmeet, suitable. We talked about that last week a bit. In 1 Corinthians chapter 7, verse 2, it talks about the fact that a man should have his own wife because of immorality. He should have his own wife. I guess that really kind of speaks about the weakness of man in some ways. But we're not going to go there today either. But the major reason for marriage is also to raise up a godly generation and following generations. That means as a husband, as a wife, our job is to raise up godly kids and then to send them out. Understand that even as a believer, we can do everything we can, and yet they still have a choice of their own. Right? And so they still have that choice. But we're to put them in an environment that helps them to understand what God's principles are and what it is to be a child of the King. And hopefully they come to know Christ, and hopefully they respond to that. In a few weeks, we're going to be doing something specific about that. We'll be talking about 3 chairs, which means nothing to you right now, but I think you'll enjoy that. It'll be a challenge to each one of us. Doesn't matter how old or how young you are. So we're to raise up godly generations. For parents who care for each other, this is what they provide. They provide stability in the home. That leave and cleave, they provide stability for the kids and for the whole family. Doesn't mean that life's problems don't come, but it means that they provide also life examples. How do I deal with problems? What are my living and choices and values and priority that we have set? And how do I communicate those? We provide problem solving in life. Anybody here never have a problem? And when our kids watch us solve problems, especially biblically, it's powerful. Or, speaking as a father, I have solved some problems not biblically and had to go back and apologize to my kids and my wife. And that has power in it also. It doesn't mean that I go do the wrong thing to make the point. It means that when I do the wrong thing, I have to humble myself and go back, because when I go back and I apologize for it, God can take that and help my kids or my wife to respond in a positive way. It provides love in action. Through thick and thin, difficult and easy, it shows commitment to one another. Sometimes Michelle will tell me, I love you, but I don't really like you right now. And that's okay, because the love is the commitment part. And the like is sometimes I act like, moving on. It provides spiritual growth. Soon after we were married, and I don't remember if our son was around yet or not, but soon afterwards, because I think we were 18 months into marriage when our son blessed us with his arrival. But I remember being at church one day and walking out into the parking lot and walking with a gentleman named Paul Geider. Paul Geider was my 3rd grade Sunday school teacher. And here I am now 22, 23 years old. And we were just talking about kids and stuff like that. And Paul said to me, I used to try to always get my kids to read their Bibles. Read your Bible. Read your Bible. And they never would. And then one day God talked to me and said, Paul, why should they read their Bible when they don't see you reading your Bible? And he said, I changed. And I started reading my Bible and let them see me do it. He said in 6 months, all 3 of my boys are reading their Bibles. They saw spiritual growth in their dad, and that made them hungry for some of the same. Gentlemen, moms, grandmas, grandpas, we need to be forging links of godly generations. That's part of what marriage is about. And that's what healthy marriages provide for the kids. It also gives them hope for the future. Gives them hope relationally. We don't have to become statistics. It means the sun will rise tomorrow, even when things are difficult. And it also provides us as long-term mentors for our kids and for others. We've had the joy of 2 of our grandsons, well, actually more than that, probably all 5 of our grandsons at some point coming and just kind of sitting down and saying, Nana, what do you think about? Pappy, what do you think about? Nana and Pappy, what do you think about? And we're the old ones in the family. It helps us understand let me ask the question, help me understand how we can change to a stronger relationship as a husband and wife. Well, I'm glad you asked that, because I have a few answers for you. Not exhaustive, but a few. First, we need to understand the word husband. The word husband, is that a noun or a verb? Who said both? You're right. Sometimes it uses a noun, sometimes it uses a verb. Scripturally, it's actually a verb. And the word means husband. It's an agrarian term. It means to cultivate. Don't worry about that. Is that me or what? Anyway, it means to cultivate. So that means as a husband, I'm supposed to be cultivating my wife's growth. I'm supposed to be cultivating my kids' growth. We often think of it just solely as a noun. I am husband, king of the roost. Yeah, do what I say. No. In fact, we'll see that in Scripture in just a second. I need to hurry along because I know this could take a long time. It means to cultivate. When I was a kid, we had a farmer down the road, and probably a lot of you that farm will understand this, but his name was Skoko. And he would plant an area, and he had his own fruit stand out front, and he would have squash and pumpkins and corn and all kinds of other stuff that he would put out there. In the early spring, before spring actually broke, he would go out, I'm told, and walk the land and kind of look at it. And he'd pick up some dirt. He'd till it up and then pick up some dirt and he'd smell it to see what it smelled like. I'm told he would even sometimes taste it, because he knew that if the ground was not right, it would not bring forth great fruit from it. And by him smelling it and tasting it, he was old enough to know what they're doing. And he would add to that what it needed so he could bring back a bountiful harvest and make the money that he needed to make. So to cultivate. 1 Peter chapter 1 verse 7 and 8, 7 through 9 says this: You husbands, in the same way, live with your wives in an understanding way, as with someone weaker, since she is a woman, and show her honor as a fellow heir of the grace of life, so that your prayers will not be hindered. I'll read the rest of it in a second. But the idea there is that as husbands, we are to understand our wives because they are weaker. And the word weaker there doesn't mean, it's not talking about weaker in stature or weaker in thinking or mental process or anything like that. It actually is referring to a vessel that is to be honored with great honor. We have china that we are now eating breakfast off of. It's interesting. We've had this china for almost 50 years. I think we've used it once or twice. Why? Because it was the good stuff. Now we're treating it as every day because we never used it for 50 years and we want to use it. But to understand my wife is to know her so well, to be a student of her, to know her so well that I know what she's thinking. I know when she's hurting. I just know things about my wife because I have studied her. Why? The verse goes on and it says, to sum up, all of you be harmonious. Where's that start? In my house. Sympathetic. Where's that supposed to start? Loving. I'm commanded to love my wife. Compassionate. Humble. Not returning evil for evil or insult for insult, but giving a blessing instead. How many arguments would be ceased if instead of an insult being returned, a blessing was given instead? You were called for this very purpose, that you would inherit a blessing. And I'm sure that just describes your house. I trust it does, in a growing fashion. Because we do struggle. We do have a sin nature. But let us continue to excel still more. Second thing I just want to touch on is honestly evaluate your current family. Is it kid-centric? Is it marriage-centric? How did you get there wherever you're at? Maybe it's a combination of the two. Is it where you want to be as a marriage? So sit down and talk about that and honestly evaluate. Why? Because if you don't evaluate, you can't change. In marriage counseling, when I meet with a couple in marriage counseling, I will often take something and set it on the table in front of us. And usually there's one sitting there and one sitting here. They may be together, they may be separate. But I ask them to describe what they see, each one of them. And usually they describe a little bit different because their vantage point is different, unless they're sitting a long ways apart, right? Then their vantage point is much different. And then because I'm sitting over here, I say, well, that's not what I say. This is what I see. You see a bunch of flowers. I see a bunch of green. You see maybe part of a basket. I see the whole basket. And the whole issue about evaluating and working through issues in marriage is that we walk around the problem and we talk about the problem so that we fully understand what the problem is. Nobody gets to take it and say, this is mine, you can't say that. No, we keep it on the table and we talk about the problem in such a way that we can not be emotionally energized, but we can talk about it and we can actually solve the problem. Sometimes the key problem comes back to me. I need to humbly confess and own the responsibility and then deal with it. Sometimes it's both of us. I think once or twice it's been Michelle. But you see what I'm talking about? It means to really honestly evaluate something without getting emotional or getting offended. Be willing to accept responsibility and confess. Be willing and ready to forgive and to begin afresh. Here's some questions you can be asking yourselves in that setting. What are the areas of strength of us as a couple? What can be done to strengthen areas that are weak? Understand and honor the differences between the two of you, because two are better than one, and you complement each other. For single parents, find another single parent of the same sex that you can sit down and talk with, or someone that's spiritually mature that perhaps you'd like to be mentored by. When we first got married, I did exactly what my mom and dad did. Dad would come home on payday, give his check to my mom. My mom would pay the bills. I came home on payday. I'd make the deposit. I'd give her the deposit slip. She'd pay the bills. Well, we weren't really flush at that point in time. Both of us were working until someone got pregnant. We had an MG, but we won't go there right now. And anyway, as I was studying my wife, the stress was causing her physical issues. And so finally we sat down and talked about it. And so I took the finances off of her plate so she could, because that wasn't her strong suit. Not that it was mine, but it wasn't, and then I began to deal with that. And I had to grow in it. And I made some stupid mistakes and I had to take the responsibility and confess it and pick it up and start afresh, and she had to forgive me and blah, 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 blah. But you work it out together, whatever the issues are. What are the strengths of each person? What's the strength of the couple? What's the areas that need help? And then how can we do that together? Set a plan and work the plan. If you don't have a plan, you'll fail every time. So set a plan and work it. And understand that it's over time. First thing I would encourage you to do, if you're not doing it right now, is date your wife. Life gets busy, and usually they're the last ones we date. We'll date work, we'll date the tractor, we'll date our guns, we'll date our animals, we'll date all kinds of things, but we won't date our wife. Date your wife. How do you do that? Number one, you should be clearing your calendar weekly, but setting a calendar a month ahead. Jim, we don't have time to clear the calendar. Yes, you do. Do it at a meal. Do it before you go to bed, one night a week. Do it whenever. We usually get up in the morning and we'll try to clear our calendar, usually Monday or Tuesday, so we know what's coming up that week. And we set our calendars at least a month ahead. Some things we set farther out, especially vacations. Be a gracious cheerleader. When the ball gets dropped, be thankful for when it wasn't dropped, and vocalize and demonstrate your appreciation for when it wasn't dropped. Be gracious, because it will get dropped. I can tell you right now, I want you this next month, every week, to go home once a week and look at your calendar, and one of you sitting there going, if you're a husband and wife sitting there, you're going, okay, this should be his responsibility. Okay, this should be her responsibility, because I don't have, somebody's got to take responsibility. Both of you take responsibility, and maybe today at lunch, after you have roast pastor for lunch, decide when you're going to do your calendar. And then plan out ahead, because life gets busy and my calendar fills up all the time. Plan to make progress over time, steady progress. It's not the changes you make that cause trouble, it's the transitions. If you don't provide for transitional time, it'll blow up in your face every time. So understand that and be gracious. And then demonstrate love. Love in action. Write notes. Give expressions. Brag on other people about your spouse. That's one of the reasons why we play the game. Michelle will say to me, "Why do you love me?" And so I have to tell her why I love her or what I appreciate about her. The other day, this is probably about 3, 4, probably 5 weeks ago. She said, I think I said to her, "You know I love you, don't you?" "Yeah, but tell me how." I said, "How many?" She said, 49 ways. So I took about 5 days, and each day I did about 9 or 10 of them. Didn't repeat any of them. But it caused me really to think beyond, well, and it's never, you got a great smile. I do love her for her laugh, because when I don't know where she's at and somebody comes up and asks me, "Where's your wife?" I say, "Just a minute." "Oh, there she is. She's over there." I hear her laugh. Make a game out of it. But whatever you do, make expressions of love, brag on your wife, and write notes. Gentlemen, if you're not a note writer, your wife may have a heart attack when you do, but I encourage you to do it. If you've got roses out in the yard, cut a rose and take it to her. Just be creative. And as you do it, now I know if you take it to her, "Well, Pastor Jim told you to do it." Well, do it a second time and a third time. And set a pattern of demonstrating it. Demonstrate your love. Here's your homework project. Make an appointment with each other to begin to review, to evaluate, and to make a plan according to what I've said this morning. Why? Because I'm committed to marriage. And it's the best thing since sliced bread and old-fashioned peanut butter. And so do that. That's your homework project. Gentlemen, take the initiative to take the lead. Ladies, if he kind of falters on it, just say, "What do you think about what Pastor Jim said?" But give him a little bit of time. But gentlemen, don't be slack. At the bottom of your page, I have a few resources for the family series. Communication, Key to Your Marriage by Norm Wright. The Art of Understanding Your Mate by Cecil Osborne for men. A Heart for God by Stuart Briscoe. It's a great book, no matter for everybody. Too Old, Too Soon for parents of young kids. Reaching the Heart of Your Child, Ted Tripp. Reaching the Heart of Your Teen, Paul Tripp. Brothers. And just great stuff. And then we'll be going over some other things here in the next few weeks. And so I look forward to that. It was interesting because, and I know I'm over time, but I'll finish with just this. Thinking about what I was going to be doing during the family series, when we went up to Whidbey Island while we were gone those 3 weeks, we had a conference up there that we were going to, and Michelle had her 68th birthday, and I think it was 38, was it? And the son's 48. Anyway, but I did a surprise dinner with 3 dear couples at a restaurant and surprised the socks off of Michelle. And while they're sitting there talking, and they had been through 15 years of their kids going through our ministry and then doing some parenting classes and stuff. And at one point they said, here's one of the things I remember that you said in your parenting class. And one of them said, and another one, and we had about 4 or 5 different things. They said, those were so key. I'm going to give you those. The first one is what I just talked about this morning. I'm not going to charge you for it. Well, I guess you got to pay me, but I'll be giving you plenty of stuff. And I also want you to know that we are available to talk if you need to talk. Okay? I'll shut up. We'll sing the last song and get out of here. Maybe we should no, we need to sing the last song.